TV host, author, and singer-songwriter Brenda Crouch suffered from childhood sexual abuse and adult domestic violence.
It's no secret that our world is filled with broken, hurting people who, like I once did, feel trapped in their anger, shame, and identity confusion.
Brenda's book, Fight Forward, gives real answers to those suffering from abuse, bringing freedom from a victim mindset, leading to a new life filled with joy and purpose.
Joining me now is Brenda Crouch. Brenda, great to have you here.
Thank you, Terry.
Your book, Fight Forward, Reclaim the Real You, is your story, and you write so wonderfully about how Jesus set you free from all of the baggage that comes with abuse. And I'm always amazed at how much of this goes on in the lives of people, and we don't often hear about it because of the shame factor attached to it. For you, the abuse began as a child, and you write about how it was so interesting how we tend, in order to survive, to sort of split ourselves off. How did you handle that as a child?
Well, because of the trauma, I buried it. I buried the memory, which came out much later in my dreams and through counseling and then through my father's confession eventually. But, you know, it was during a season that my father was in a very dark place spiritually, and the roots of his own abuse manifested. And he returned to the Lord and became really just a different person, but he still carried that shame and that secret because it was so shameful that he just could not come out with that. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people who, I have such mercy for those who are carrying secrets and shame, whether they were victims or victimizers or both, that they are not their true selves. They can't be. Yeah. Because they're buried in this awful, horrible feeling of disgust.
Eventually, you were able to forgive your dad.
Yeah.
What did that entail?
Well, I really had forgiven my dad through my own process with the Lord. And then at the point where my father was on his deathbed and he confessed and he asked me to forgive him, I said, Dad, I have already forgiven you. Can you now forgive yourself? And he said, I don't think that I can. And I prayed with him, Terry. God gave us that beautiful moment to be able to pray with my father so that he could accept the forgiveness that he feared God wouldn't give. And he could accept my forgiveness and know that he was a child of God who had been completely set free and forgiven.
You mentioned the dreams that you had. I mean, really, the dreams were traumatic, but they were actually a blessing because they led to the unraveling of all of this for you. So tell us about the dreams and how that moved you into a counseling scenario that really began to change your life.
Well, I began to have these dreams in my late teen years, early 20s, that were very graphic. They were, they left me just feeling very shamed and repulsed. And my father was always a part of those dreams, and they were repetitive dreams. So they were reoccurring, the same dreams coming back to me over and over again. So I knew that there was something to the dreams, and I began to pray about it, but I held on to them for a long time. I didn't want to talk about them. And eventually in counseling, when I had left an abusive marriage, my life was a mess. I'd come unraveled and I needed help. And the counselor said that I was a textbook example of having been abused as a child. And he asked me if I could maybe, account for that. And I immediately felt shame. And so I shared those dreams with him, and he helped me to begin to unpack that, really. It was just the beginning, but it really is a journey, and it's a process of healing.
One of the things you write about in the book, and I think we don't often understand this very much, but I think it's so important for us too, is generational curses.
Yes.
You talked about what happened to your dad, then perpetrated on you, and in a sense, through the marriage years later for you, your own daughter impacted by some of that. How do we determine if there is a generational curse, and what's our ability to change that?
Well, in my book, I talk about faulty foundations, which we build our identities really on. And I talk about mindsets, because I believe that generational curses come through these faulty foundations and these mindsets that we learn. We're taught, you know, they're environmental many times, but we believe these narratives. We believe what we've been taught, that they are true, and often they're not true. And so, you know, Jesus, in one passage of scripture in Matthew, he says, you think I came to bring peace. I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword. And he talks about these relationships that he puts the sword to. And God began to show me that he was changing the dynamics of these relationships by changing the narrative that I had learned from them, and these mindsets that had plagued my mind and that had been what navigated me through life. And I think that until that surgery is performed and he brings the sword, we can't find our peace. He's also the Prince of Peace.
It's so scary to go through a healing process. How did you deal with that? And as your book says, fight forward.
It takes courage. It takes courage. And I really believe that, like me, there are so many people who want to be free, and they know that they were born for more. And so, you know, I just want to be an encouragement, because in my life, I kept trying to fix that myself. And it wasn't until I let go and I embraced the process of unraveling what I had fixed my personas with, and I gave it to God, that I let him into the place that I hated, that he set me free. And really, that's where we launch from.
You know, it's so in keeping with the Lord, who always wants us to know it's him.
Yes.
It's him doing the work. It's not because we get enough information or enough wisdom or we come to a certain place. We just have to let it all be him. So what do you want people to take away from Fight Forward? You talk about reclaiming the real you, and you know, it can come from many different places for people. Not everybody would necessarily have the same circumstances as you, but where there's shame, there needs to be freedom and wholeness.
Yes. And you're right. The enemy wounds through many different ways, but he's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And so we have to first understand that he is our enemy, and that he is the real enemy, and we don't fight this in flesh and blood. So I really believe that if we can embrace, if people can learn that it's okay, if you're at the place of failure, if you're at your crossroads where you think it is over, you're really in the best place you could be. I mean, look at Moses. Look at Moses on the backside of this desert, where he met the great I am, in a place where he had lost all of his confidence. He now stuttered. He was shepherding another man's sheep. He had lost everything. And yet God had him positioned to be this kind of stealth bomber, you know.
I want to also mention that this wasn't something that happened in a week.
No.
This was a process. Yeah, and it will be for any of us who are struggling as well. If you want to hear more of Brenda's story, and it's well worth the read, get her book. It's called Fight Forward, Reclaim the Real You. This is your inheritance from the Lord. So we want you to have it. The book is available nationwide. I just found it to be so insightful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.